This is lecture 3 for imperialism. Today we're going to kind of talk about foreign policy. We're going to talk about some of the things that end with the Spanish-American War. So the outcomes of the Spanish-American War as far as politically in other countries across the world. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Puerto Rico. So after the war, we basically kicked Spain out of the Caribbean. So now we are going to kind of get control of a lot of their territories. So Puerto Rico is the first one. We basically promised them protection, and we passed something in our Congress called the Four Acre Act. And this ends military rule in Puerto Rico and sets up their own civil government. So we have a lot of control of their civil government. We appoint legislatures, and we kind of have our hands involved, and we deal with it the way that we want to. They become a protectorate of the United States, so it's like a territory of ours, and we protect them. We promise to protect them with our military, and we can actually aid them financially as well. In 1917, we allow them to elect their own officials and become citizens. So before, the president is appointing their own legislature to do what we want them to do. In 1917, we give them the ability to vote for their own legislatures, and they actually are American citizens as well. So Puerto Ricans have dual citizenship. They're Americans, and they're also Puerto Rican. The next place is Cuba. Obviously, Cuba is a huge part of the Spanish-American War. A lot of the fighting went on there. So we had to kind of figure out a way that we're going to deal with Cuba. The first thing we passed is called the Teller Amendment. And what it says is that the United States has no intention of taking over any part of Cuba. So the Cubans were worried that we would kind of just step in and be the imperial power like Spain was and start to treat them the same way that Spain did. But we agreed not to do that, just saying that we're going to allow them to be on their own, but we will have a lot of influence in their country. So things that some of the things that we place upon them are Cuba is not allowed to have treaties with any other foreign power. The only people they're allowed to do business with is us. We have the right to intervene in Cuba in their government if we feel that their government is acting inappropriately. We can go in and do that. Cuba is not allowed to acquire debt, so they can't borrow from anyone else. We can buy or sell or lease land for a military refueling station. So basically, this is when we get Guantanamo Bay. We still have Guantanamo Bay today; it's still being honored, but we get it following the Spanish-American War. And this is again, we want to have as many territories as we can around the world because our Navy needs to grow, and that's the best way to make it work. Okay. Next is the Philippines. They're really not happy about us annexing them because we take on the kind of the Spanish role in the Philippines. Not as brutal, but we still are not treating them the way that they want. They want to be free. So it actually leads to another war between the Filipinos and the Americans, and we spent a lot of money, $400 million, and then after the war, obviously we win, but we decide that we're going to kind of step down and just give them the role that Puerto Rico has. So it's very similar between the two of us at that point. China, as I talked about, China is really, really important and starting to emerge as a country that we know has a lot of resources, and the whole world knows that there's a lot of resources there. So in an attempt to kind of get our foot in the door, we don't want to be shut out by the rest of these imperial powers. So one of our guys, John Hay, creates something called the Open Door Notes. And these Open Door Notes call for an open door policy in China, meaning that all countries can trade with China. So he doesn't want like England to go in and take China and not allow anyone else to trade with China and then have to buy all the Chinese goods through England. So it's basically setting up free trade in China. With this happening, there's a lot of foreigners that are in China all the time, and the Chinese people kind of get sick of it. So there's actually a group of boxers, like fighters, that are kind of upset about all these foreign devils in their country, and an event called the Boxer Rebellion happens. These boxers kill hundreds of foreigners, but then the international forces kind of come in to put down the rebellion and kill thousands. So obviously it didn't work out too well for them. We're going to talk about the three presidents real quick about their foreign policy. So the first thing is Teddy Roosevelt, and his policy is big stick diplomacy. You should probably write that down. Big stick diplomacy basically calls for you to speak softly and carry a big stick, you will go far. So what he's saying is that he's going to have this, like, all this might, and you can see in the picture back here, his great, white fleet, and he's got a really strong military. He doesn't need to do a lot of talking. He lets people know that we are a powerful force, and you can't really mess with us. And he kind of gets people to do what they want because of, like, he calls it a big stick, but it's like the threat of war that he has, that he's going to basically trounce you if you try to stop anything that he does. Okay, and the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which I talked about in the last lecture, basically what he's doing is he's warning other countries to stay out of Latin America, and if they don't, then he's going to threaten them. And that's what this political cartoon is all about. He's pointing his cannon right at a royal from England, or from Europe, saying, "Get out of Latin America here." So we basically become this international police force, and this is where our idea of isolationism really starts to crumble, and where we become like this world police force that's expected to protect a lot of the world. Teddy Roosevelt and Taft kind of both use the idea of dollar diplomacy, where U.S. banks are going to help nations in financial trouble. They would basically take on debts of foreign nations, and in order to pay off these debts, these foreign countries would have to let them kind of be in charge of their custom duties. So any money that's coming into their country through customs, like selling goods, would go to these foreign banks until their debts were paid off. So not really a good deal for the countries that they practice this, Dominican Republic being one of them, and a good way for us to kind of take advantage of these countries. Last thing is Woodrow Wilson and his idea of missionary diplomacy. Whenever we talk about missionary or moral, it's a religious sort of thing. That we have the moral responsibility to deny Latin American governments that we viewed as being oppressive. So any undemocratic or hostile to the United States interest type of country, we would stop them from being that. So we would pressure nations in the Western Hemisphere to establish democratic nations. So basically, if there's a government that's or trying to push something besides democracy, we could step in and stop that. Again, it's our interests that are involved there. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. So the Panama Canal is the first example of big stick diplomacy. Roosevelt was adamant that we build a canal that connects the Pacific to the Atlantic, because it's going to help trade, it's going to help travel, and it's going to help military. So everyone can get to each ocean and not have to sail around all the way around South America. So the way that it was kind of big stick diplomacy is that Roosevelt stages the Panamanian Revolution against Colombia. Colombia owned Panama, and he basically sparked a riot, and then he kind of stepped in with his Great White Fleet, put some ships off the coast of Colombia, and said, if you keep fighting, we're going to come in. And so Colombia relinquishes Panama, and we take Panama is free, and they give us land in order to build a canal. So you can kind of see how the canal works. The height from the Pacific to the Atlantic is different. So you have this huge lock system. These fill with water, and they help you to raise the ships up to the different levels. And it wasn't just all locks. There's like territories where there's rivers going through Panama, and they could sail through that. And then when they had to change elevations, they get to the locks until they got out into the ocean. Okay, and the last thing is moral diplomacy. Moral diplomacy in action. The Mexican government begins to crumble in 1911. Revolutionaries had overthrown the government and also executed some of the leaders. The most famous one is Pancho Villa. There's a picture of him on the right, and kind of a political cartoon of Uncle Sam chasing Pancho Villa into Mexico because we are being threatened by them. So we didn't like what was going on. We didn't like the fact that they were killing people. So our moral diplomacy, our moral actions, made us go to Mexico and help them. Pancho Villa was kind of a I guess like a little punk to us. He would like cross back over into America and like blow up trains or train tracks and try to like kind of hurt us. And one of our really famous commanders for the military, John Jack Pershing, Black Jack Pershing, you may remember his name from last year. He comes in and he tries to find Pancho Villa. He incites some riots and spends some money. And then World War I comes, and Woodrow Wilson pulls him out and sends him over to Europe. So Ponte Villa never really is captured by us. But this kind of shows the idea of moral diplomacy and how we are doing what's in our best interest, because obviously Mexico is really close to us, and we need to make sure that their government is working well in order to trade with us. So that's imperialism. I hope you enjoyed.